So today's call is on a thermostat that's blank. Notice it's got a big crack right here. It reacts to touch, but you got nothing on the screen. They're getting construction done. They're getting a remodel right now. So more than likely it got broke during the remodel. First thing we're going to do is check voltage at the stat. So I've got 27 volts going to the stat, but it's blank. So we're going to go disconnect power and then change the thermostat. All right, so here's my unit. Nothing crazy. We're going to power down, but I wanted to point something out. I wish I had a duct detector in here to show you guys. But a lot of times these units are tied into the fire alarm system. So what happens is, I'm going to power this down right now. When I power this down, what happens is the duct detector loses power. This isn't always, but this particular system right here, this is how it's working. The duct detector gets power from in the unit. So the duct detector just lost power. And usually what happens is they are wired into the fire alarm system through the trouble contact in the detector. So if it ever loses power, it doesn't set off the fire alarm, but it sets off the trouble condition for the fire alarm. Okay, it's two things. It's a tamper. So basically we have a trouble contact in the duct detector, and what it's there to do is to prove the circuit. So on a lot of the duct detectors, you can set them up to where if it loses power, the troubled circuit drops out. So that way we know. So what I had to do was I actually had to have the manager call the fire alarm company and put their system on test, so that way they wouldn't get a silent signal. Now typically they don't dispatch the fire department when they get a trouble condition, typically, okay? But no, what they usually do is they'll call the restaurant and say, hey, we just had a trouble condition. And what the trouble condition does is it usually serves two purposes in this case. Here, it lets them know if the unit gets powered down, because if the unit gets powered down, it no longer has that duct detector working anymore, okay? And then also the trouble circuit, they have a resistor ran across the trouble contact, and if that resistor ever disappears, it either means that we've lost power to the detector and or one of the wires running from the fire alarm panel has been broken. So it's a way to prove that the fire alarm circuit is there all the time. Okay, I know I've showed that in videos before, but just wanted to point that out. So before I came up here and powered down this unit, I let the manager know. They put the system on test, and then that way I can come in here and start working. So this isn't how it is at every single restaurant. You need to know your systems, okay? If you ever are worried about it, go ask the manager. You know, if you've never been to that particular location, ask them, hey, do you need to call anybody when I shut down the unit? And sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, thank you for reminding me, you know, because they don't want the headache of the phone calls or whatever. Now, I've been at a shopping mall before, and their system was wired in a way that when I shut down the unit, the fire department showed up. That was not fun. When you turn your back around and there's a guy on a hook and ladder truck popping up over the roof, and it's like, wait a minute, what happened here? That was not a fun situation, and that was actually a mistake. They had something done wrong in their system, but it was a new restaurant. Someone wired something wrong. They corrected it, but still, you always want to be cautious. You don't want to be setting off a fire alarm or sending silent signals to anybody. Same thing goes for, I'll take you downstairs here in a second, but for like a walk-in freezer, if you're doing walk-in freezer work, you're going to be doing a lot of construction in there, maybe fixing a door, hanging new hinges. There's silent alarms a lot of times in the walk-in freezers too, and those ones are no joke. If you set off a silent alarm in a walk-in freezer, the police come code blue, no sirens, helicopters usually, depending on the area you're in. If you're in a shady area, they come and they're not happy when they find out it was a false alarm, because the silent alarms are there. They're basically panic alarms in case they're getting robbed. So I'll take you down and show you one of those panic alarms right now. In my opinion, this is how a panic alarm should look. This one has a protective safety cover, so you can't accidentally set it off, but you would just pull down on that and it would set off the panic alarm. But let's go over here. Sometimes they have them in here too. Let's see. Nope, there's not one in this situation, but sometimes you'll see them on the head of the door right there, or down in here, and you won't even realize they're there, and you could smash boxes into them, or if you're hanging a door, the vibration can set those things off if they're really sensitive. So you always want to be cautious about fire alarms and alarms. Always want to pay attention to that code, because that's your password for the thermostat if you ever get locked out. And if that doesn't work, that number plus 1234 is the backdoor password for the thermostat. Okay, gonna go through these programming functions real quick. I'm not gonna break this whole thing down, but I'm just gonna show you my most important things through all this stuff. A lot of the things I just leave the same because I only have 2 stages of cooling, but I do have 2 stages of heating. Don't really change any of these cycles right here. Don't mess with the extended fan run time. Okay, this is an important one right here. I only want 2 periods per day. This is a restaurant. We want on and off. There's a really important one in here when it comes to remote temperature sensors. Okay, wired sensor on S terminal. That's any kind of remote sensor, so you need to say yes. Wired indoor remote sensor. Yes. Indoor sensor. There you go right there. Indoor sensor T-stat terminal S1. That is correct. What type of sensor? Here's really important. Use T-stat sensor for temp control. No, because I have a remote sensor. Use indoor sensor for temperature controller. Yes. That's it. So you got to answer like 4 questions, and if you don't, I don't need to do any more of this stuff. You could do all kinds of stuff in here. You guys can read the manual. You want to exit yes. Okay, so now we're going to go put it on the wall. I've got a 20K zone sensor. We can go ahead and set the time. I don't think it'll let me set the time, actually. Let's see, yeah, I'll set it now. So this is pretty much the only thermostat I sell for the most part. I just use these everywhere. That way I can walk my technicians and my customers through troubleshooting them over the phone. Now I'm just waiting. We're going to do a full call for cool right now from down at the thermostat to make sure everything's good. And then when the cooling call shows up, Y1 and Y2 are energized, let it run for a minute, then I'll put it into heating mode and test W1 and W2. We're just making sure that everything is correct. We're not just going to throw that stat in and walk away. Yeah, it was broken. Yeah, that's probably all that's wrong, but we need to verify that, you know, everything's good, because we're going to own this when we walk away. So.
All right, so nothing too complicated. This was a service call on a thermostat that wasn't responding to touch. When I arrived, I found that the thermostat was broken, the display was blank, but it was responding to touch, like it would light up when you touched it, okay? Like I said in the video, they were doing construction at this particular restaurant, and they just busted the thermostat. Interesting thing is that this particular restaurant chain is doing this construction all over the place in my area right now, and this is the 3rd one I've had a broken thermostat at. So, hey, thanks construction company, you're helping me out. That's pretty much it on the repair. Okay, it was nothing too crazy. Always look at the big picture. Make sure you test the functions of the thermostat, heating and cooling. I actually made a recommendation to the customer that they let me come back out and do a more thorough test on the AC, because I noticed that it had a pretty strong burning smell when the heat exchangers lit up. We don't use the heaters out here very much, but we're just coming into the time where we're going to. So I suggested they had me come up and just burn those heaters off and go through everything. They're going to call me back out probably next week. Go through that and test all the heaters and make sure everything's good. But important about the alarm systems, okay? Whenever you're working at restaurants, you want to make sure you're paying attention to stuff. You know, it's important to understand how their fire alarms work and their panic alarms and different things, okay? I know the panic alarm has nothing to do with the air conditioning unit that I was working on, but I just thought it was important to bring that tip up, okay? But yeah, so whenever I go to work on, depending on what restaurant chain it is, I know, you know, this particular chain wires their ACs into the trouble contact the way that I explained in the video all the time. So when you power down a unit, it sends a silent signal to the alarm company saying that there's a trouble condition. Now, it's important to understand there is a difference between a fire condition and a trouble condition. A trouble condition is usually a supervisory issue, just like, hey, we need to get the alarm techs out here. Maybe there's a broken wire, or hey, you got a powered down HVAC unit. When you wire them up that way, you can also use that kind of as a theft deterrent device too, right? Because if a crackhead is smart and he comes to steal that condenser, well, I guess maybe smart or not smart, he powers it down so he doesn't get electrocuted. Well, when he powers it down, he sends a trouble, or he creates a trouble condition within the fire alarm system. So, you know, they get a silent signal in the middle of the night, and then depending on what, you know, the protocol is they usually call the general manager no matter what time it is and say, hey, we just got a silent alarm saying you had a trouble condition. Do you want us to dispatch? They may dispatch fire or PD, or they may do nothing. It just depends. So, but, you know, that's a cool theft deterrent device that you can do. I have a duct detector video, and I believe I go kind of into depth about the supervisory contact on there and how you could do it using a resistor. You know, and that's pretty much it, guys, okay? Thanks for taking the time to watch my video. Consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and give the other channels some love that are popping up right now. Check them out, and I will see you guys on the next one.